Chair, fellow speakers, multilingual is an interesting word or words, because what we're talking about is the ability to put the message across to more than one group. Now, what we're looking at is Afghanistan elections. Okay, so the Afghanistan elections, they had three main languages: Pashto, Dari and English. And the idea was, how do we do news stories in three different languages, 5 of them a day in each of the languages? Well, the original concept was, mobile phones, text. Well, yeah, sure. 5 messages that are going to be something like 300 or 400 words each one. You don't want to be texting that sort of rubbish. And so they contacted me and asked me how they could do it. And so I came up with a system which you all have used. You might not think you have, but you have. It's called interactive voice response. Now, what you get is, you dial a number, and a voice comes on and says, in English, press 1 for English, and then it's Dari for 2 and Pashto for 3. So you press the button for your language, and you then get another message saying, there are 5 news stories. Number 1 is, press number 1 for this one, so it gives you a brief synopsis. 2, 3, 4, 5. Each in 3 languages, so you've got quite complicated. And then, of course, that's relying on people ringing in. No, not this system. This system was way beyond that. What we did was feed in a database of phone numbers relating to shapers and movers, the sort of journalists, ministers, etc. All these database names are put in, and at 8 o'clock in the morning it started ringing them one after the other to give them the messages. And we had 8 lines running. So we had the 8 lines, and we had another 8 lines for people to ring in who hadn't been put on the list. And so it was quite a complex setup. The hardest part for me was getting hold of journalists who could speak English and their own language, and teaching them how to run the setup. Because they'd come in with a story, and each of them would be given the same story, and they'd have to do it in the language. Then it had to be uploaded to the system, and then put through the editor. The editor was a guy called Professor Ivor Gaber, who was a professor in London at one of the universities. And he was brilliant. He just listened to what the messages were going to be, and then told them what you wanted removed or what you wanted adding. And of course, NATO were not happy. They were very unhappy with us. There was a lovely story. I can remember sitting in the office and someone said, NATO says there's a convoy been attacked at so-and-so. Yes, well, any more people reporting it? Well, yes, we've got 5 so far that reporting a donkey got blown up. And NATO were adamant that we couldn't put the story out. Because they wanted it to be a convoy, because that meant they were being seen to do things, but no, this was a donkey. And so Ivor just said, do it. I don't care what they say. Do it. It's the truth. We've got 5 people saying so, which is what you're supposed to do in journalism. You are supposed to have more than one source. 2 or 3 are perfect, but never one. And unfortunately, our newspapers and some of our radio stations take 1 or even less now, and AI tell them what to do, which doesn't work. Now, that part of it was quite straightforward. The difficult part was living in Kabul. Every day you had to go a different way to work. You couldn't use the same route because it would be noted, and then you'd either get blown up or kidnapped. So you had to be a bit careful. And our own reporters, one of them looked just like a Taliban guy with his kit on, but they would go out doing these reports. And one thing that really stood out, was, why would you want to vote in the Afghan elections? Really, you're supposed to be voting for a new president. but is it worth the risk? Because when you go and vote, you go in and they take your hand and they mark your thumb with a great bit of indelible ink, and that's it. That's proof that you voted. You can't go back in again because it's... What happens? Taliban catch you with a black thumb, what do? Chop it off. So, why would you want to vote? So nothing we could do about that. That was one of the things that was there, and we could do nothing. We then had a situation that I got some time off, and it was fascinating. Muslim countries tend to be very difficult when it comes to women. Afghanistan was probably the worst. But with the sort of Western government that was running at the time, women could work. They could drive cars. And so a couple of the women working in the office decided that I needed to go out and have a bit of fun. So they took me up the back roads, up into the hills, and the first thing I saw, grapes. You know, great big piles of grapes. And I said, well, what do you do with those? You don't turn them into wine, do you? No, well, some of the areas do, but normally we turn it into drinks and dry it for raisins, etc. So that was interesting. And he said, oh, by the way, we've got more varieties of grape here than anywhere else in the world. We've just got more of them. So we carried on driving up the hill, and we got to this little village, Cusi, I think it was called, and we had lunch. Oh, what a lunch. Of course, you don't have chairs, you sit on the floor. And they had a thing called something chai. As you know, chai is tea. Well, it was called something chai, and the teapot was full of a goat stew. And then you had one of the big flatbreads, and you poured your goat stew onto it, and then you got various other things, tomatoes and garlic and stuff, and chilli, and you put that onto your plate, and you eat it with your fingers, and when it comes to the end, you eat your plate, because it's bread. So that was quite good. And the other thing good in there was pottery. They had a pottery there, and I did buy a pot to bring home, because they were different, and so that was good. They had a hydroelectric plant, which was protected by a guy with a sniper rifle. And I went over and asked him about his rifle. He said, well, have a look. I said, no, thank you. I don't want to touch that. And he was quite happy to talk about it. And then we had this little boy. The vehicle we were driving, the bottom end's exhaust fell off. So this little boy went underneath with wire and wired it all up so it stayed there. It's just great. So Afghanistan's a lot of fun, but it's also dangerous. But it was good for us to be able to set up a system that was multilingual and not just English.